Hi, welcome back to another episode of Reviews with Bro, where I'll be reviewing another favorite of mine, a band that just released their newest album with a returning member, Parasomnia by DreamTheater. Now, this band is very important to me. It was the very first prog metal band I'd ever listened to. Images and Words is one of my favorite albums of all time, and this is the first album marking the return of Mike Portnoy back in the band. And as far as I know, there have been some references to previous works to the band that they've put out on this record. Now, the sound of this album is a little bit darker than previously explored, at least in my experience, with the album delving into sleep disturbances, kind of creating a narrative throughout the album, which I think the music very much demonstrates and matches. They have some like ticking clocks here and there, some ominous voices that help create this vision and atmosphere. And I think it's best listened to from start to finish, much like a film, and also much like many prog metal releases in general. Now, one thing to note is that, because every song besides one is over 5 minutes long, it's a little bit more difficult to talk about them as just like one whole piece. There's lots of different movements within each song, and there's parts of some songs that I like within the song that I like more than other parts of that very same song, which is kind of one of the trademarks of prog music, of exploring and experimenting with song structures and how one part can lead into the next. And I find this experience to be kind of closer to the experience of life in general. There's some parts of a chapter you may like more than others, even parts of just one day that you may like more than any other. So, having said that, let's get into the track by track. Now, the first song on the album is In the Arms of Morpheus. It's an instrumental that really sets the tone for the whole album. It starts off with some very eerie sounding piano, which winds down with a menacing clock counting down into the big opening chords and some drum fills many fans have been waiting to hear for a long while from Portnoy. And once the riff begins to kick off, you're really taking on this adventure through, the best way I can describe it is like an adventure through someone's nightmare. However, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and everything opens up into this beautiful emotional guitar solo that only Petrucci could, pull out of his rear end. It's great sounding, very emotional, very beautiful, and like I said, great start to the album. Now, the next song on the album, Night Terror, has some more atmosphere building in the beginning of the song that leads into some of my favorite riffs on the album. That is very, the best way I can describe it is very Sabbath-esque. Sometimes, just keeping it simple has high payoffs. And after that, we have a more DreamTheater sounding riff that's more exemplary of their style and sound. I think James LaBrie sounds great. I know some may say he doesn't sound as great as he once did in the 90s, and I typically do agree, but I think on this album in particular, he sounded better here than most of his other recent works. The solos on this song are very interesting, with parts making me feel like I'm like spiraling downwards, much like someone would feel when facing night terrors in their dreams, and it's a great track all the way through. The third song on the album, A Broken Man, has this very ferocious, furious start to a track that takes you out of whatever headspace you happen to be when listening to the previous song, and has some even more ferocious drumming from Sir Portnoy, as I like to call him. And afterwards it opens up a bit more, and I hate that I don't have any other words to say this, but it opens into a more vibing riff and kind of atmosphere that allows you to kind of mellow and think in place. And it has some like orchestral elements that I find very interesting going into the verse. And what I love about this verse is that LaBrie adds some grit to his voice, and it's some of my favorite phrasing that he's done on the album. The progression and unraveling of the song is a real treat, and I might be my favorite on the album, as it doesn't stay in one place for too long. It's constantly shifting between different elements, even while it goes back over parts it's already visited. And this includes this very like 80s bar blues meets kind of hair metal portion of one of the solos, which I think is overdone or has been overdone and should have been left in the 80s, but they find a way to make me even look forward to this portion of the song of the solos. Dead Asleep has a very soft opening to a song with a melody that reminds me a bit of something from some of the more Kingdom Hearts games. I can't quite place exactly where and when, but whenever I heard it, I was instantly taken to those games. But it quickly turns into this menacing melody riff that causes my hair to stand almost, especially once that guitar comes in mimicking it, and it's very, as I like to say, stink face inducing. And then there's a quick break from that stanky riff with another beautiful passage and solo that leads back into it. It's a really lovely verse and chorus that leads back into that riff that I really appreciated and loved. I think Labrie has found his form on this song in particular, and is one of his best performances on the album outside of the ballad, which I'll talk about later. The start of the guitar solo is a lot of fun with a stinky riff leading into it, and then the band just dropping out, leaving just John Petrucci and Mike Portnoy kind of working together, and then slowly everyone coming back in, adding to it, which is then followed by a killer keyboard solo. The song ends much like it began, leaving me in this kind of melancholy state after having stink face for nearly 8-9 minutes straight. Midnight Messiah. Now, even though the song is 8 minutes long, it is the most basic structured song with, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, solo, rinse and repeat. But I think it ends up working for them for the most part, and it's just that I did not appreciate the chorus as much as the choruses on other songs, and I found kind of everything surrounding it, to be much more enjoyable. I haven't touched on this in other videos, but I find spoken word intros and portions to be incredibly cheesy and not in a good way, or at least in a way that I appreciate and like. And the song unfortunately does that at the very beginning of the song, but once the riff kicks in and kicks off, you can ease back into it and start rocking away. I love when verses just have the riff rocking its way and slowly other elements like the keyboards get added to it. But unfortunately, like I said earlier, I think this energy is kind of lost once the chorus is reached, and I find it to be a little unexciting and a bit of a letdown after having such a fun time leading up to it. And then not only that, I even find the solos to be a bit predictable and unexciting on this track in particular, which is a shame because, like I said, the main riff and verse are just that great. Are We Dreaming? It's a very short interlude that cleanses the palate before the final two songs of the album and continues the atmosphere. It's pretty skippable in my opinion, but I felt I needed to include it because it is a track on the album. But for the most part, for a minute, you're kind of just... let me take that back. After having said what I wanted to say, what I thought I wanted to say, it is... I would say it's not skippable. You should probably keep it if you're listening from back to front, because it does build perfectly into the next song, Bend the Clock. Now, Bend the Clock, I've said before, I'm not a huge ballad fan, but this is certainly an exception to that rule. It has a beautiful soft start that shows what else the band can do besides playing quickly or complex. And I think Labrie has, a very beautiful voice, and I think it's very fitting and perfect for these types of songs. As the song builds and unravels, more exciting elements are slowly added, and you don't even realize that you're walking away, which is what I love about, what prog musicians are able to do. They can have something simple that slowly becomes more and more complex, and the transitions into each part can be very sneaky. You don't even realize where you're at most of the time, and this band is no exception to that. And I think the more simple parts make the more extravagant playing and more complex parts and solos more exciting, and I appreciate more that these musicians can do these things and play that well, and it doesn't feel as showboaty, and having shreddy solos over a slow, simple backing makes it feel more emotional and actually has substance. And then the song slowly fades away with the solo still firing, This production trick, I think, is a little overplayed and sometimes a little bit lazy. However, I can understand why they do it, especially when the band is firing on all cylinders. You don't want to like have to force them to stop. You don't have to force them to find a stop. It's better just to capture that energy going all the way through and slowly have it fade off. So again, great song, great album, great ballad, and definitely one that I recommend checking out. Now, the final track on the song is the longest song on the album, the Shadow Man Incident, and it's almost double the second longest song on the album, which I think they could have shaved off just a minute or two and had a more impactful, song on their hands. But again, this is prog metal that we're talking about, so expecting them to keep things short is a, kind of a losing battle. It's another atmospheric start that leads into another Sabbath-laden riff that opens up to some very 90s, mid-2000s prog metal sounding territory, which I love, especially with, with bands like Circus Maximus and Seventh Wonder. That part kind of reminded me a lot of them, or I guess I should say, because DreamTheater is so impactful on the genre in this territory, Circus Maximus and Seventh Wonder sound a lot like DreamTheater. After a fun adventure through, the human psyche, a very mellow verse emerges that I don't really appreciate, but it allows me to appreciate what comes up next as things pick up from there, and a fast-paced riffing that we've all wanted to hear comes in, leading to a very almost anthemic sounding chorus that I really quite enjoy. I just wish that it didn't take, nearly 8 minutes to finally get there, but it does, it is worth the wait, I should say. I do think the solos, I think, are a bit showboaty, which again, that is prog, but they do go into some quite interesting areas with, such as having like a straight up piano solo rather than a keyboard solo over, a very, very heavy, riff backing behind it. It creates a very interesting, comparison, contrast, I should say. And it's just an enjoyable treat. Usually bands will go for the straight up keyboard solo and not actually just do a straight up piano. And after return to the main theme and chorus, we have another slower guitar solo that ends with a big clear finish and has a reprisal of the melody found in A Broken Man, followed by an atmospheric end with someone telling us to finally wake up, because that is kind of the theme of the album is, sleep disturbances, and is a great end to a great album. So, final thoughts. Like I said, I think it's a great album, very fitting for the return of Mike Portnoy. While some songs could have been cut a little bit short, I don't think there's too much bloat or filler on the album, like I have thought of with some of their previous works, some of their most recent works, I should say. And overall, I'll have to give this a solid 7.5 out of 10. And my top three favorites in no particular order: In the Arms of Morpheus, a Broken Man, and Bend the Clock. I'd love to know some of your thoughts, some of your opinions. Let me know in the comments what were your top three favorite songs. What do you hope for next on the next album? And before you do that, any of that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.